how I tell your story. That is what we're going to jump right into today. So, as a ghostwriter and as someone that is a master storyteller, I have come to find out that most people don't tell a story the way it should be told. In all honesty, it's okay to be able to tell a story in a very linear way where everything is chronological. But there are five things that I like to use when I'm telling your story. And I want to jump right in. So, these are things that most people don't consider because they're kind of unconventional, but we're going to get there. Okay. So, first and foremost, I like to tell your story outside the frame. What does that mean? So, outside the frame means that everything that's not the main idea. In the frame is talking about your story, your life experiences, the things you did, and along those lines. But outside the frame is the context around it.
It's a dirty truth for Deante Young. Hit a main course, yeah, the entree done. Pull up on the gang, all the fly day ones. Tune in, come and see what Deante done. It's a dirty truth for Deante Young.
Let's say that you were born in the country versus being born in the big city, or you were born into wealth, or you were born into poverty. So without telling outside the frame, there is no point of reference for people to really look at to understand your story. Because I can say, yeah, when I was 15, I ran away from home, and then I got a job and I failed at that job, and then I met this weird person, and the end. But without the context of saying, okay, am I rich? Am I poor? Do my parents beat me? Am I from a broken home? Do I have loving parents? Are they rich and they don't have time for me? So outside the frame is important. Also, the part of outside the frame is the context of the world. Were you born in the early 1960s or were you born in the late 1990s? Because that has everything to do with how your life goes and who you are and the types of influences you have. So if someone was born, say, in 1961, I'm going to automatically know that, oh, they were born during the Kennedy administration because I'm a stickler for dates and it's not something I can help. But it ends up being a superpower because I'm instantly able to discern some idea of what your story is outside the frame. So for someone that was born in 1961, we know that when they come of age, they're going to be somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s. So that means their experiences are going to be completely different. They're going to be shaped by the Vietnam War. They're going to be shaped by the civil rights movement, specifically if they are black. And so that's why I like telling the story outside the frame because it gives context to it. And I give you a perfect example. So I wrote an article about Tupac Shakur, and the article I wrote it with context and with texture. So just I'm going to give you a little sample of it. This is what I wrote. Tupac Shakur, full of creative energy and brimming with bravado and hostility, went thermonuclear 30 years ago this week. Now, I wrote this about 2 weeks ago. The 25-year-old hip-hop superstar had just been sprung from a New York prison October 12th, 1995, 4 days after the Chicago Bulls signed Dennis Rodman, and a full 9 days since an LA jury acquitted double murderer O.J. Simpson. For Pac, the early release from an 8-month stint in the joint meant an even bigger release of score settling, legacy solidifying, and an introduction to his I'm the badass Mickey Ficky in the rap game. Or shall I say, I'm the baddest Mickey Ficky in the rap game attitude. It's well known now, but that week in October 1995 was a battlefield for Shakur as he relentlessly recorded material for what mostly became his classic opus, All Eyes on Me. That battlefield was destined to become a war of words, violence, and the foolish pride that comes with the male ego. In his crosshairs were his chief rival, the notorious B.I.G., along with Nas, Mobb Deep, and Puff Daddy. According to those present at the time, Pac completed entire verses for his upcoming album in one take, was charismatic yet fiercely focused, and fed off the fresh out of prison success of his friend Mike Tyson, who beat a nobody named Peter McNeely in a boxing match 2 months earlier. So I'm mentioning people like Dennis Rodman. I'm mentioning people like O.J. Simpson, Notorious B.I.G. All these people, Peter McNeely, Mike Tyson. These people are decades gone by as far as pop culture goes, right? And so I'm giving that texture because I want to make it a point to let it be known we are firmly planted in 1995. I don't want to just make it about Tupac. I want to make it about the world around him. Same thing with your story. Let's say that you are from Amish country, but you come to the big city. All right, so it's important to know that certain things you're going to look at in the big city, you're going to look at in a different way than someone who is from the big city because you are from Amish country. So I have to paint that tapestry outside the frame. It's very, very important. And so that's one of the things, the key things that I think we need to do is do that outside the frame. At least that's how I tell your story. Number two, influencers. So, who are the people that influence you throughout the course of your life? Because we all have someone that influences, whether it's a person that we never met, or whether it's someone or a song or a quote or a podcast or something. But in this case, I'm talking specifically about the people that influence us. So, Wayne Dawson is a good friend of mine. You see him on the cover of that book. When I ghost wrote his book, I asked him very point blank, "Hey Wayne, who are the people that influenced you?" And as a kid, it was President Kennedy, because at the time, Camelot represented John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie Kennedy. And so Wayne was about 5 years old when President Kennedy took office in 1961. And so Wayne said that he was inspired by JFK and he wanted to be president. But then as Wayne got older, he started realizing that he wanted to be in the media and really he wanted to be a reporter, and but then it transitioned into being a broadcaster. So he was a fan of Max Robinson, who was a national broadcaster long time ago, and then later it was Bill Jaycox. Now Wayne ended up being in the broadcasting world, and right now, as this moment progresses, he is in his 46th season as a broadcaster. He's been in numerous Hall of Fames, as well as an 11-time Emmy winner. And so your influencers, they are extremely important to your growth and development. And that's why it's important not to leave that out when I tell your story. Another example is Stephanie Morris Nunn. She is my second ghostwriting client, and she's legally blind, and she's a fashion model, highly talented, extraordinary fashion model. And she's just very, very studious. So I asked her how was she influenced and by whom, and she told me that growing up as a young girl in the 60s and 70s, she was enamored with Stevie Wonder, and she was enamored with Phyllis Hyman and Michael Henderson. So I asked her specifically about Stevie Wonder. I said, "Why Stevie Wonder?" Well, she said the obvious is that, he's blind, she's blind, but also Stevie and Stephanie kind of go together. So I thought that was really something. She was also into Earth, Wind, and Fire and the Dramatics and these types of people. And it really shaped her worldview, and it gave her a vision of who to be able to look at and say, okay, they have this disability. I can connect to their story and say, I can do things that I maybe not have thought that I could, because if they can do it, then I can do it. That's the kind of thing. For me, Michael Jackson was my first enormous influencer in my life, because the way that he dressed, the way he presented himself, the way he spoke, the way he moved, the way he thought, the way he executed, all of those things downloaded into my operating system as a very, very young child. And I said, if Michael can be that way, I can be that way. If he can be unique, if he can be esoteric, if he can be different, or if someone wants to call me weird, Michael Jackson gave me a permission slip to be who I am, because those that matter don't mind, those that mind don't matter. So he was a huge influence over me. Same thing with Eminem. Eminem, many years later, he was a big influence to me, because I'm looking at him and I say, man, he is using the worst parts of his life to really build his own personal brand. And he's not shy about talking about his mother getting him on drugs, and how much of a deadbeat she is, and how his father was even worse of a deadbeat, and how he has nothing but antagonism for his baby's mama. And he loves his daughter with a passion, and he's from a trailer park, and he does these pills, and he does all these types of drugs, and he's also a raging alcoholic. and that endeared him to his public. So the thing about that is that he became an influencer to me, and there's many others. So I always want to tell people's story through the lens of who are they influenced by. Number three, pain. So people try to run from pain. They try to hide their pain. They try to bury it. They try to act like it does not exist. But I'm going to tell you, perfection will never create connection. Truth is persuasive. Pain is persuasive. So when I tell your story, I'm using your pain. Another perfect example with Wayne as a young kid, he was getting very good grades in school. When he got to be around 13, his family moved to a different place, but his parents' relationship and their marriage was falling apart at the seams. And that put Wayne in the unenviable position as a teenager to where he had to be a de facto father to his brother because his mother was pregnant when his father left. This is all in Wayne's memoir. And so Wayne had a little brother where he had to be more of a father figure, more of a role model now that his dad was gone. He also got bad grades being around the wrong crowd and had all these different situations come about as a result of that. So that was a lot of pain. And then when Wayne was in high school, he was at a place where he allowed himself to go downhill so far with his academic consistency that he had to fight for his survival just by going to college and to going to summer school and going to night school in order for him to graduate. And so that was a lot of pain that he had to endure, but it made him stronger. Pain always makes you stronger. And I try to get people to understand that because one of the strongest things you can do is just share your pain because it's so relatable. It creates a line of connection with people. So sharing your pain is extraordinary. Stephanie Morris Nunn, she was beat and abused by her husband when she was pregnant. She was beat senseless, had to spend some time in the hospital. Another time, he actually held her at gunpoint in front of her kids, and one of them was his child, and he told her to say goodbye. She also had to deal with a mother who didn't seem to be engaged at all. So she had to have sort of a surrogate mother. And she, to this day, sees her more as her mom than her actual mom. And then she also had situations where her father had moved to New York and she would go and see him and visit him. But on his deathbed, he just didn't give her much of anything. I mean, she wanted him to be more than what he was, and he just was unable to do it. So that was a lot of pain. She held a great deal of pain. But the thing is that with all that domestic abuse and then all of the relationships she had with the people that's supposed to care the most about her, they just constantly let her down. So imagine sharing that pain. And when she did her book signings, people were connecting with her in a way that they hadn't even imagined. People that had known her for years, they didn't realize that she was dealing with so much pain. But we all carry so much pain in different forms, and we can relate to each other. So that's pain. Number four, pinpoint accuracy. Pinpoint accuracy is so extremely important when it comes to me telling your story, because when I say pinpoint accuracy, I mean the dates have to really, really line up. The details have to really, really line up. I know most people won't care. They may think it doesn't matter, but it's always going to matter. So with Wayne, when I was working on his memoir, there was a really pivotal moment where I said, okay, Wayne, when did your mom die? And he wasn't really sure. He said, I think 1998. Well, that was not going to make me feel comfortable in putting that. So I said, "You're not sure?" He says, "No." I said, "Okay, well let's try to figure this out. Were you married at the time she died?" He says, "No." So I knew that she had to have died prior to August 29th, 1997, because that's when he was married. So then I said, Wayne, what was going on in the world, if you can remember, at the time that she died? So he thought about it for a second. He said the Republican National Convention was being held in San Diego and Bob Dole was going to be a speaker. Well, I know personally that in those circumstances only happened once, and that was in 1996. So we got it narrowed down to 96. I looked it up. Bob Dole, he was speaking in August of 96. And then I tracked down Wayne's oldest living cousin, and she had the obituary of his mom all these decades later. So I looked at the obituary and it said that she died August 7th, 1996. I also saw that her date of birth was August 12th, 1930. So in the book, I wrote as Wayne because I'm ghostwriting as though I'm him. I wrote something that he never personally said and didn't even know. So in that part of the book, I said my mom died peacefully on August 7th, 1996, just 5 days before her 66th birthday. Wayne didn't know any of that stuff. He didn't realize it. But when you read it, there's nobody that's going to think, "Oh, Wayne didn't write this," because everyone would assume that he knew that information and those details. So it was extremely important that I didn't just go with what he said. So another case in point is when I was talking to Stephanie Morris Nunn, and we were talking about her life and the things that she did. She was talking about her youngest child's father and how they met sometime in 1983, and they had a lot of fun throughout the summer of 1984 and things like that. And with her being a young woman of her early 20s at the time, I start trying to connect things as to, okay, let's see what I can do going again outside the frame. And I had mentioned the movie Purple Rain and Prince because there was nothing hotter in the summer of 84, in the second half of 84, than Prince. Of course, the Jacksons were on tour, but Purple Rain was the brand new thing. And so when I mentioned Purple Rain and she says, "Yeah, yeah, me and him, we went to the movies and we saw it so many times, and oh man, that movie just did something to me." And so I put her in a place and time to where she was able to connect that situation with this guy that she was just crazy about at the time, who she eventually got pregnant with his child. And she was able to connect that to the pinpoint accuracy of when they were together. And so, since Purple Rain came out in the summer of 1984, I was able to tell her with pinpoint accuracy, this is the time frame where that was going on, and it worked out perfectly. Same thing with her date of birth. She was born October 2nd, and I told her that on her birthday in 1995, it was when the O.J. Simpson verdict had come down, but it did not get read until the next day, October 3rd. With her being a victim of domestic violence and O.J. Simpson being accused of domestic violence and, of course, murder, I tied that to her story, and with pinpoint accuracy, I was able to take the date, which was after her birthday that year, and that particular year she turned, I believe, 35 years old. I was able to bring that up and make that a part of the story. It just gives the story a richer tapestry. So I people make fun of me for knowing dates and stuff, but I can't help that I know dates just off the top of my head. I can't help that I know that November 22nd, 1963 is when JFK was assassinated. I can't help the fact that I can say October 3rd, 1995, the Simpson verdict came down, or August 16th, 1977, Elvis Presley was killed, or August 28th, 1963, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. These are just things that are imbued in my mind. And so I use that to help tell your story. And then number five, defects. I love to use defects, your own personal defects, to tell your story. What I mean by defects is the blemishes, emotional, physical, psychological things that was your fault that you don't really like talking about, you're ashamed to talk about. It might be rough to talk about. It's you not necessarily in your finest hour. Wayne, he was a drug dealer, a drug user, an alcoholic, a womanizer, all by the age of 13. Those are things he does not necessarily want to talk about. He wasn't proud of them and still is not, but he loves to be able to talk about it to lift people up. And that's very important. So Wayne always says, he says, hey, when you start talking about your successes, it creates competition. But when you start talking about your frustrations and your hardships, it creates community. And I could not agree more. And so I love to use people's defects to elevate them and put them in a position of being really in a leadership role. And so, in the case of Stephanie Morris Nunn, she had a situation where she was a teenager and she was wearing thick pop bottle glasses, felt embarrassed. People were not giving her the time of day. She wanted validation. And so one of the things she did was she started selling drugs as a teenager. It got her attention, and it gave her a certain level of popularity. And so she talked about that. That's considered a defect. She's not proud of it. But by sharing that, you're able to create people because now they're just like, man, I did that. Oh man, I thought that you were like pristine, Christine, but no, you're not. And how, so now you want to connect with people. It's hard to really connect with someone that seems like they're too perfect or they didn't do anything wrong. I quote the line from Training Day, the famous Denzel Washington, the immortal Denzel Washington. In that movie, he played a dirty cop, Alonzo Harris. He says, you have to have a little bit of dirt on you for anybody to trust you. And that's quite frankly, in a nutshell, what I believe in. And so that's why defects and telling your defects, your dirty truth, your hardships, your setbacks, your challenges, the things you're not proud of, that's why it's so extraordinarily important. And I tell you one thing, going back to the pinpoint accuracy, the guy that I'm working with now, he's a 55-year Hollywood veteran. His name is Harold Crawford. He is a Hollywood costumer. He got into the business in 1970. This guy is the real deal, and he's worked with some of the biggest names in television, film, and stage, and working on his memoir. So we started this week, and what I said to him, I said, "Listen, we're gonna do things this way." And he told me a story about something that happened when he was 15 and a half years old. Now I know his date of birth is July 31st, 1949. So 15 and a half years old would put him right around 1964, 1965. And so he says that this calamitous situation, horrible situation that was happening to him when he was 15 and a half happened, and all he can hear in the background was a particular song by the Beach Boys that was playing. Well, I did research because, again, that pinpoint accuracy, I look it up and I find out that that Beach Boys song came out in 1966, which would have made him at least 17 years old. And then we kind of went back and forth. He insisted he was 15 and a half. I told him, I said, you can say what you want, but the facts and the historical nature of things say otherwise. And even when it came down to him telling me what junior high school he went to in Palm Springs, I looked that up. I looked up the place where he was living at with his grandparents when he was still a young child, like really almost an infant. And it was, the name was different, but I'm checking all that for pinpoint accuracy. And then, like, when it comes to defects, there's a lot of things that we have not covered on the record, but he has told me about them in other ways. So it's very, very important for me to be able to tell your story with those five different components. Number one, outside the frame, everything that's not a part of your main story but's connected closely to your main story. Your influencers, your pain, with tell it with pinpoint accuracy, and also defects. Now, with all that being said, that is just sort of in tandem with my new framework. I am the proprietor, the founder, and the developer of a new storytelling format that I call Live Set, which is an acronym LIVESET, and it's a revolutionary storytelling extraction and deployment strategy that I'm going to be using on high net worth individuals, and I've already been using it unofficially throughout the course of the time I've been doing it, but it's very important. So before I let you go, I want to tell you again what Live Set encompasses in a nutshell. So I'm going to give myself less than 5 minutes. So Live Set, the L stands for Legacy Shadows. That is the context in which you were born and raised, and the people and environments that surround you. You're already swimming in that water before you know you're swimming in it. So that's your legacy shadows, things that happen to you that you don't have anything that's any control over. All those different types of things. That's your circumstances and the context in which you were born. And then the I in live set is internal intersections. So our lives always intersect with other people's. Your internal intersections are the people that are blood related with you and they have been in your life from the beginning. And the quotes and the advice and the lessons that give you, whether it's your mother, your father, your grandmother, your granddaughter, your sister, your brother, that were there at the time of your birth, those are very, very important people that are a part of your life that your life intersected with. And then the V is for virtual intersections, which are the people that you've never met, whether they're famous or someone that you just never met that's not famous, but somehow they inspired you from afar, or it's things that are in the media, such as podcasts, YouTube videos, songs, things that inspire you in some way, quotes, audiobooks, regular books. Michael Jackson, for example, would be considered one of my virtual intersections because I never met him, but his life intersected with mine, but not the other way around because he doesn't know anything about me, but I know about him. And what he did was inspire me. And he was a virtual intersection. Any book that I read, I have a lot of books that I've read. The Go Giver, that is considered a virtual intersection. Oprah would be considered a virtual intersection of Tyler Perry before they met because she encouraged him to write when he watched an episode of her show when he was broken, desperate, and going through depression years before he met her. Okay, so then the E would be external intersections. Those are the people that you meet throughout the course of your life. A boss you had 30 years ago, a school teacher you had 40 years ago, a best friend you've been friends with for 60 years, the a person that you met for 30 minutes or 30 seconds 6 years ago that made an impact on you in some way, shape, or form. And so those are people that bring a lot of value to your life. A great example of that would be Dr. Dre and Eminem. So Dr. Dre would have been one of Eminem's virtual intersections initially before they met. Once they met, he became an external intersection, and he massively affected his life, and vice versa for Eminem to Dr. Dre. So that's virtual intersections or external intersections, excuse me. Then the S, your signature self. So your signature self is in a nutshell your personality at scale. Every aspect of your personality, are you an open-minded person? Are you down to earth? Are you outgoing? Are you negative? Are you kind and caring? Are you competitive? Those are your personality traits. And then, of course, your quirks. Dennis Rodman's personality got him very far. Anything that's considered quote unquote weird or unusual, that's part of that, but also just your personality overall. And then E would be the second E would be edge battles, and that's closely tied to the seven deadly sins. So we're talking about gluttony, we're talking about lust, we're talking about all these different types of things. So when you are addicted to something, whether it's drugs or cigarettes or caffeine or sex or anything. For me, an edge battle for me was lust, which was in the sense of needing validation from girls and women because I didn't feel like I was good enough. So I needed their validation, or so I thought. And that was very difficult to live without having that. But it's a battle that I continue to deal with for so many years and decades, and that's something that's very much a part of my story, as it is with everyone else's. The last one is T, tradecraft, and that is not only your skill, but it's the story around how you develop that skill. Think Michael Jordan, who became a world class basketball player, the greatest ever in most of our eyes. But think about his story and how amazing it makes his skill. So he started off getting beat by his older brother Larry, who ended up only being 5'9". Jordan is 6'6". And then Jordan ends up wanting his father's validation, and then he ends up getting cut from the high school team. Then he goes to North Carolina as a freshman, hits the winning shot to win the championship as a freshman. Then he goes to the Olympics and dominates there, gets drafted into the NBA in 1984, and then wins 6 NBA championships, 5 league MVP awards, 6 finals MVP awards, 10 scoring titles, became a basketball Hall of Famer, and changed the way that the business of basketball, the business of sports, and the business of branding and entertainment is done. So he has truly and totally created an amazing story around his skill. So that's the live set formula, but that can be applied to not only a book, but also newsletters and social media posts and keynote speeches and all of that. But it's impenetrable. But I really wanted you guys to understand the way that I tell your story is second to none.